Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Dani and today I want to talk about the books that I read in March. I know I'm a bit late with this video, but I had all the April vlogs going on during the month of April, so that's okay. We'll go into March now and I have a lot of really interesting thoughts for sure, even with arcs and just very popular books that I might not have the most popular opinion. So let's start with my stats. So in March I read 6 books, which was a total of 1,613 pages, and I listened to 26 hours of audiobooks. My average rating was 3.3, which is very low, not what I would want really, but it happens, and I started 2 series. I also caught up to 1 series, but that just means that I DNF'd it, and I'll talk about it when I get there. In terms of formats, I read 3 paperbacks, 1 ebook, and 2 audiobooks. All of them were full-length novels and also adult books. There were no middle grades, no YAs, no novellas, no manga, and nor anything in between. And in terms of genres, I read 1 fantasy, 2 sci-fi, 2 horror, although one of the horrors could also be categorized as sci-fi, but it's more of a horror, so that's where it is, and 1 contemporary. And for ratings, I had 1 4.5 stars, which was the highest rating, 1 4.4 stars, 3 books were 3 stars, and 1 was 2.5. So it was a rough month. But let's start right into it with the first book that I finished in the month of March and my highest rating of the month, which is The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. This book happens during COVID, and it tells the story of this guy who works at a tech company, and he has all these great ideas, and he's really smart, but he ends up being laid off because of COVID and because his boss is not a nice person, and he becomes a delivery driver for a food app. In one of those deliveries, he meets a guy that he studied with a long time ago, and he gets a new job. He gets hired by this guy to go to the Kaiju Preservation Society. So if you don't know what a kaiju is, because I didn't know when I first heard about this book, it's basically Godzilla. So any of those big monsters that we usually see a lot in Japanese culture, that's a kaiju. So the ginormous monsters that terrorize cities in Japanese movies, that's a kaiju. Godzilla is a kaiju. So basically the story, the setting of the story is in a sanctuary for kaijus, and it's so amazing. This book has a lot of pop culture reference. Even in the beginning, it mentions Murderbot, so this is amazing. This is great for people who like pop culture references. I would say that this is not a book that's going to be life-changing. It's not going to blow your mind with the themes that it's exploring or anything like that. It's really just a fun ride. The dialogue between the characters are super funny. He gets into a small group of friends very quickly, and all of them are amazing people and just really funny people, and the way that they interact is kind of like through insults because they like each other, you know, that sort of relationship, which gets really funny. And there are Godzillas, and they have names, and I'm not going to tell you the names because that's one of the best things of the book. I would definitely recommend this if you like funny books. So think of The Martian, but more in a pop culture aspect, because the whole book is filled with humor. If you don't like a character that's being snarky and humorous all the time, this is not going to be for you, but if you do, definitely check this out. It's so funny. I gave this 4.5 stars because I just had an amazing time with it. It was slow sometimes, so it could have been a 5 stars if the pacing was a bit better, but overall, just amazing. And that was the highest rating, right? So we're going to go 2 or 3 stars now. And that is episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. I was very interested since I first heard of this book because the setup here, the premise of the story, is that we're following a crew of a ghost hunter TV show that's just now filming episode 13, and they get to go to the most haunted mansion in America, or something like that. Yeah, so they call it the Ghost Hunters Holy Grail, which is the house called Paranormal Research Foundation, which is a house where in the past they did a lot of experiments with people and trying to see if they could, can I tell you that? I think so. If they could see paranormal things. So that's a setup for the house, and that's where they end up in. And the story is told, the book is told in mixed media format, so it's interviews. You probably won't be able to see, it's just words, but it's interviews journal entries and stuff like that. There's even, let me find it. There's some text messaging going on, some tables of information. So the whole thing is mixed media, which I always love. I love mixed media books, and this was not an exception in that sense. In the mixed media format, it was a quick read for sure. But after reading it, my first thought was that maybe I just don't like ghost stories. So like I said, this was 3 stars, and it was just okay in the end. I really like the premise, I really like the setting and the mixed media format. But with ghost stories, just in general, as a subgenre, I think that is just, it makes it easy for the story to just blame a ghost. So anything that happens, like anything can happen and you can blame a ghost. You know, so it doesn't have to be explained. I think the idea of this kind of book is that it's a spooky adventure and you're just going to be on the edge of your seat waiting to see what happens. But I think I need more than that. And it's weird that I say that this was just a fun adventure, fun ride that I really enjoyed. And this one was a fun adventure that I didn't, because I didn't think the characters were well fleshed out here. I like when the story comes full circle, in a sense, that everything kind of matters in a story. And it's okay if it's an open ending. I don't remember what's the ending of this one, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm okay with open endings. But I like the full circle in the sense of we're setting up to something that kind of gets developed throughout the story. And here we get a premise. We quickly start that premise so we can get into the spooky aspect of it. So it's very like detached. You know what I mean? So really there was just something missing in this book for me, in the characters, in that whole structure of how the story is told. But it was a quick read. The mixed media is a lot of fun. It did keep my attention. I wanted to know what was going to happen next, but the ending was just not satisfying. I still want to try other ghost stories, ghost books, to see if this is just really a subgenre that I don't enjoy. But it was okay. It was 3 stars. It was average. I would definitely recommend if you like ghost books, if you like just a paranormal TV reality show kind of thing and mixed media books. I think this is a lot of fun still. But I think it was just really lacking for me in terms of character and plot. And then we go into the other 3 stars. There was another horror book. And we start to think, do I just not like horror? Should I stop reading horror books? That could be it. Like, I don't know. But this is Where They Wait by Scott Carson. And it was a 3 stars. The premise was very interesting. So in this one, we have this guy who is a journalist, and I think he can't find a job or something. Then he gets hired by this man to go back to his hometown, to their hometown, to write a story about this app that's being developed in the hometown. Like they have a headquarters there where they're developing this app that helps people sleep well. That's basically the premise of the app. And he goes and he decides to start using the app to see what it's like to really write a convincing story about it. But of course, creepy things start happening. So this is a lot in dream format. Like there are a lot of things here that happen in dreams, which is already something that I don't like. Every time there's a character dreaming in a book, I just don't care enough. Because as much as a dream can be a premonition to something or a self-reflective way to realize what the character was going through and was feeling at the time that something was happening in the story, I just don't care because it's a dream. And here, it's kind of more than a dream, and that's all I'll say. But really, thinking back to this book, what I remember from it is more positive than negative, so I don't really know why I gave it 3 stars at the time, but I'm not going to change my rating. That's what I was feeling at the time, so that's the rating. But just the fact that I don't remember why I gave this rating kind of makes sense that it's a 3 stars. It was average, it was fine at the time, but it just didn't grab me. It didn't have that extra thing to really make me enjoy the book. It was just okay. Would I recommend it? I guess so, I would. I think this was still a very good story. The audiobook was really good as well. So if any of what I mentioned sounds interesting to you, I would definitely give it a go, but it's not super horror and it's not super sci-fi. Like with the app thing and with the things that happen when he uses the app, it has a lot of horror elements, it has a lot of sci-fi elements. I would say it's almost, it has equal parts horror, sci-fi, and thriller, maybe? Which kind of sounds amazing, but it didn't deliver for me. So I think I wanted a little bit more of the horror, if that makes sense. Or a little bit more of the sci-fi. But that's it for Where They Wait. And now let's talk about The Puppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is definitely the most popular book I read in the month. And this was a 5-star prediction just because of the hype, I guess. Because of how much people love it and things that people say about it. But it was 4 stars in the end. So it was a good book, I enjoyed it, but it did not reach the 5-star level. And I'll explain why. So let's start with the good. This book is brutal. It's dark, it's intense. There are scenes here that are going to give you nightmares. But all of that in a way that only a really good and well-written book will. It is a slow story, but I was never really bored reading it. I wanted to keep reading. I wanted to know what was going to happen next. I still want to know what is going to happen next in the series. I love the magic system. It's not very well explained yet. I feel like we're going to get a lot more. Same for the world building. It's interesting, but I can feel that there's a lot more that's going to be explored in the other books of the series. And I didn't say what this is about. So this story is about Rin. She is a girl from a city that's like very poor, very not like important in the world that they live in, like this fantasy world. But she wants to be part of this very prestigious academy that's in like the capital, and she has to pass a test. So in the first part of the book, we're following her studying for the test while she has a lot of other stuff going on in her life. So there are a lot of the academic side in this book as well, which R.F. Kuang writes so well. I really loved Babel, especially the classes and the professors and all of that part of it. And we have a lot of this here as well. And we have a magic school here, which is a lot of fun. I always like a magic school. So I really enjoyed following the story, following this character, where we only have her point of view in the whole book, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, pretty much. We only have her point of view in the story. And I really enjoyed following her, really enjoying the journey that she went through, but mostly the plot, like what was happening while she was living her life. Which lead us to the bad. Why wasn't this a 5 stars for me? What I didn't like about it? Mostly the characters. So Rin for sure, but also most of the other characters that she goes to this magic school with. The main thing here, I think the characters were written very young, and they start young, but many years pass in one point of the story, but they still behave very young. In a world, in a scenario, in a situation that's brutal, and I feel like they should have a lot more maturity than they do here. And most of the interactions between the characters, especially between the younger characters, but also with the young and the older, felt like a YA book. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I like YA books. There are a lot of YA books that I really love, but this is not what I expected from the situation that we have these characters in. This world is much darker than any YA book that I've ever read. And just the situation, the way that she grew up, I just expected a lot more maturity from her and from the other characters as well. And just for the writing, for the dialogues. And one other thing that I didn't like about the way that the characters were written and the way that the story was set up with these characters was that the older characters, they are older characters. We have their professors, we have the army, we have like a lot of like older important people in the story, but they were completely absent. We're hearing everything from her point of view, like I said, but still I expected to have those characters be more present, but in the end we kind of have the typical teenager saving the world type of thing here, which they're not teenagers, but they behave like teenagers, so that's what we're going with. So just because of that, I could not give this 5 stars. The part of the characters really disappointed me in this book, because the world building is so amazing, and the writing with the way that she explores all these themes and all the other parts in the book, it's really, really good. And I feel like I'm going to enjoy more the sequels, knowing kind of what to expect and knowing that these are who these characters are, and I just kind of have to accept it. So we'll see. But for this one, I just expected more. But yeah, those are my highs and lows with the Poppy War. And on the next two books, I don't have physical, so I'm going to come here so I can put a photo of the book here. And the next one that I'm going to talk about was the lowest rating of the month, and that was Quantum Radio by A.J. Riddle. So this is the same author that wrote Lost in Time, which I read in January, I think, and I gave 5 stars. I love that book. That one is about time travel, and the guy goes to dinosaur era, and a lot of really cool stuff happens that I didn't expect. And in this book, this is about quantum physics. So it's not exactly time travel, it's more dimension travel, I'll say, without giving too much away. And again, a lot of things that I didn't expect, like the story went to a path that I did not expect, like Lost in Time did, but for this one, I really hated it. So the premise of this book is that we have this quantum physicist that he's studying the Hadron Collider, the particle collider, and in doing so with sciencey stuff, he finds kind of a message hidden in the particles. So they go to explore more of that, and they call it a quantum radio because it's as if someone, something, somewhere, someone was sending them a message through quantum particles, which is all very confusing, but you really do not have to understand all of it. It's really cool in the beginning of the book that when he starts to explain what he did and like what his discovery was, he's explaining it to a room that's filled with physicists, astrophysicists, whatever, but also like people from the administration of the building and investors and stuff like that, and people that don't really understand anything of science. So it gives the author an excuse to info dump a little bit so we can get on board and understand what's happening on the science side. So there is a lot of science talk in this book. If you don't like science talk, maybe not for you. But overall, the first half of this book I really enjoyed. A.J. Riddle's books, for the two that I read, reminds me a lot of Blake Crouch, in the sense that we have this whole science setup to tell a more thriller story. But the issue with this book was the whole second half was, oh my god, it was so boring. So this, first of all, is the beginning of a series, and this is a series that I DNF'd. I'm not continuing, I don't care. I've already forgot everything that happened, mostly. I just do not care. Because what happened in the second part of the story was basically an alternate World War II story, and it was just so boring. I don't care about that scenario. The alternate history part was not good, and the character, so not even just in the second half, but also in the first half, there's a lot of very convenient things that happen. So for example, they need a password for something, and the main character will be like, oh, I have a feeling that the password is 1234, and everyone was like, why do you think that? He's like, oh, I just know, trust me. And then it is 1234, and we kind of never explored that. And that happened so many times. So I for sure would not recommend this book for sci-fi thriller fans, for Blake Crouch fans. As much as the first half really feels like that, the second half is World War II alternate history. If you like those two things, you should read this book. You'll probably enjoy it a lot. But for me, I just did not care. So it was 2.5, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. And lastly, the last book that I read in March, and the one that I think a lot of people are just waiting for me to talk about, or you just skipped here, is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is her new book, and I read 2 books by her in the same month. I read Poppy War, and I've read Babel last year, and I had an arc for Yellowface, and I was waiting because I pre-ordered the book, the hardcover, and I wanted to have the book and read it physically, like with the hardcover, but I got an e-arc of it on NetGalley, and I was hearing so much hype for this book that I just couldn't wait, so I just picked the ebook and I read it there, and I was expecting to love it because it's R.F. Kuang. I really enjoyed her other books, and everyone's been talking so highly about this book, and the premise is so cool, but it was a very big disappointment. It was 3 stars, and it totally makes sense why it was 3 stars for me. So let's start with the premise. We have Athena and Juniper. They both graduated together, but Athena had a very successful writing journey. She's Asian American, and Juniper feels a little bit that that's why Athena has been so successful. But what happens right in the beginning of the book is that Athena dies, and Juniper finds her manuscript for a new book that no one has heard about before. So she takes that manuscript and decides to publish it in her name because her career has not been going very well, and this is a really different writing style and one that has resonated with a lot of people in the past with the other books that Athena has written. So that's the premise. So like the tagline of the book is something like, this is a great story, it's just not hers to tell, or something like that. So Juniper is the one that we're hearing the story from, and she's a very unlikable character, which is fine. That's the setup of the story. But I think that the way that she was portrayed changed a lot from, are we supposed to be sympathizing with her? Are we trying to humanize this character? And she's a really big bad villain, and she's just evil. And it was changing a lot between those two things, and I just never could grasp what the author was trying to say. But also, the character was very inconsistent in what she did and what she said. There were a lot of situations that it just didn't match for me. I'm like, this is kind of feels like you should be doing something completely different from what you had just thought about before. And there was a big reveal in the end that was very obvious for me, and I just don't know why the main character didn't get it. So again, we have characters that I didn't really enjoy from R.F. Kuang. I hope that doesn't continue being the case. Babel was not the case, so these were exceptions. But just going to the themes that this book is trying to talk about, they're of course very important and very, very interesting, don't get me wrong. And also, I do think that they're going to be more relatable to writers and people working in publishing, because as much as I could get some of like what she was trying to imply with it, it's just not relatable to me because I don't work in those scenarios, in those fields at all. So I think they're interesting, they're important, and I enjoyed hearing from her voice about this topic. But a lot of it was very heavy-handed, and that's something that she did in Babel, but I don't know, I enjoyed more in that situation. But here there was a little bit of nuance, but a lot of it was just very heavy-handed, and it was just a lot of exposition of those themes. So in the end, it was not a great reading experience. I think all of the things that she was trying to explore in this book could maybe have fit better in a non-fiction book, because here there were a lot of we had pages of exploring the theme, but not of the story actually happening. But again, it was a quick read. I enjoyed it. I was intrigued to know what was going to happen in the end, and it was all very interesting. So it was an okay book, but just not what I expected. It didn't reach that level that I expected. But remember, this is a contemporary book, and I don't read contemporary books exactly because of this sort of thing. I think that it's too simple in a way that I just don't enjoy. It's not what I enjoy reading. So I would like more if this book had gone on full thriller, which kind of almost did. There were a lot of situations there that were more thriller, but it was just contemporary. So if you read contemporary usually and all of these things sound interesting to you, I would definitely still recommend. And maybe what I felt with the main character is something that is not gonna bother you so much. But that's my feelings towards Yellowface. I didn't cancel my pre-order. I still want to have the hardcover book, not only because the cover is amazing and I love how yellow it is. I bet it's going to stand out with a spine on the bookshelf. But I do like her writing. I do want to own her books and have them to recommend. I think she's an amazing writer. It's just, this was not for me. And I hope it helps you maybe decide if you want to read it or not. But if it sounds vaguely interesting, give it a shot. So these are the books that I read in March. Let me know if you read any of them or if you're interested in reading any of them now. And if you stayed until the end, leave an yellow emoji in the comments. Any yellow emoji, just pick your favorite yellow emoji. But I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and thank you so much for joining me. Bye!